I told you the story about how my brothers managed to like get my parents to let me play Diablo, right?
I don't remember.
I played Diablo when I was like 4, because my parents believed in like as long as I know that's not what real violence is like, it's okay. And so my brothers managed to convince me that there wasn't any blood in the game. There was a lot of ketchup. The monsters, they loved ketchup, and they carried ketchup bottles around with them so that they could put it on their food. And when you hit them, they fell over, and the ketchup bottles broke and just spilled out everywhere.
So yeah, hi internet, I'm Jaren.
Hi, I'm Justin.
And from that rambling story about ketchup bottles, welcome to Discourse Dojo.
Yep.
Today we're talking about Shovel Knight.
Yeah.
Which is a game about shoveling.
It's
and
fucking,
knights.
It's fucking colors and just, it's blast.
Shovel Knight is a game about shovels and a game about knights, and both of those elements are actually true.
Yeah, and I don't even think we need to lay up a spoiler warning thing, because I don't really, like... I guess we might spoil the ending. I don't know. If we get to the point where we're going to spoil the ending, then we'll hang up a spoiler warning. Until then, you're fine.
Well, I mean, in general, if we do a podcast about a game, there might be spoilers.
Yes.
That tends to be how it works.
Right, but, like, this is not a story-heavy game like Unrest.
A little bit.
A little, but, like, Shovel Knight, for those of you who don't know, Shovel Knight was a Kickstarted game, you know, just like what fucking indie game isn't Kickstarted these days. And it's about a knight who uses a shovel as his weapon, and it's basically a throwback to, like, NES days. But it isn't one of those games that commits to the limitations of the NES. It just sort of uses that style. And, like, it has chiptunes, it has pseudo quasi 8-bit graphics, and yeah.
Pseudo and quasi.
Exactly. Jarenth, what did you think of Shovel Knight in general?
I had quite some fun with Shovel Knight. I thought it controlled well. It was fun to play in short bursts. I liked the graphical style, and I liked the audio a lot. The writing is pretty fun, too. It does take certain elements of traditional NES games that I would have wished it hadn't. But for the most part, it's basically a love letter to that era of gaming, while still being a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What did you think?
I liked it. I was kind of apprehensive because I'm tired of games that just, like, carry on that style and just, like, don't improve. Like, I played this one indie game called Oniken, I think it was, and it was just, like, it used the exact same limitations of the NES. The sort of thing where, like, if you kill an enemy and then step 5 feet away, then that enemy respawns as soon as you step back. And since you can only take, like, 3 hits before you die, it just ends up being, like, fucking unplayable. It basically was, like, Ninja Gaiden, like, NES Ninja Gaiden, with a different skin, and that was very frustrating to me. I was like, there's a reason we don't make games like this anymore. And Shovel Knight felt like it transcended those days to a degree. So yeah, I liked it a lot. I love action platformers. That's, like, probably one of my favorite genres. So yeah, I had a really good time. And I've been waiting on them to release some of the stretch goals because they couldn't manage all of them before release, so they're doing some of them as updates. There's going to be a boss rush mode, and there's going to be a battle mode where you can play as the bosses. And there's going to be a gender bend mode, and I'm wondering how they're going to do that.
Well, given that Shovel Knight is wearing a full plate of armor...
Yeah, it might just change dialogue, who knows. But I like, it sounds neat because it doesn't just change Shovel Knight, it changes everybody. Like, the Enchantress becomes the Enchanter, and stuff like that.
And all the other characters that you know and love are going to become exactly the same characters with maybe slightly different sprites.
Yeah.
But then again, it's probably
maybe
credit to the writing of Shovel Knight that there's not really any character that feels like they were, I want to say, shoveled in. for titillation or minority purposes. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I'll take it.
But yeah, Shovel Knight's a lot of fun. To follow up on what you were saying earlier, it is very much... It feels like an NES game so much, which is almost impressive, because I've seen a lot of games that say that they want to emulate that era of gaming, but then they only really do the graphics, the 16-bit or 8-bit graphics, and maybe some chiptunes, and that's it. And Shovel Knight actually goes really far with the graphical style and the graphical palette, and it's not just that they use chiptunes, but they actually have that limited array of chiptune sounds. The controls are really simple. It is basically a game that you could play on an NES controller.
Yeah. Well, I like that the default is like NES controller accessible, where it only uses the like D-pad and 2 buttons, but you can actually set it to because like the way it works is Castlevania style. You hold up and press your attack button to use a special ability, but you can go into the options and change it to like a separate button if the prospect of having to do up B to do that annoys you, which it annoys me. Like, that was one thing that made me like Super Castlevania 4 a lot more than the original Castlevania. Was like, I can press R and throw my axe or whatever. That's awesome.
I wish I'd known that, because I was jumping and my analog stick was slightly more tilted up than it was tilted forward, and then I pressed an attack button, and then my Shovel Knight was like, oh, you want me to use this item? Oh, you want me to use this item again?
Yeah, exactly.
And again.
Yeah,
and again.
That was and this. Yeah, that's why I had to switch that as soon as I realized it was a thing. And I gotta say, like, out of all the magic skills you get in the game, I think the one that I used by far the most was like the temporary invincibility.
The phase lock, that is by far the best one.
Yeah, like, there were so many really treacherous areas of the levels that I could just completely bypass by using that, like just walking on the spikes and stuff like that.
Or go up to the boss and then trigger the phase lock and then just wail on them for a little bit.
Yeah, it's great.
That's how I beat a bunch of the bosses.
Yeah. That is actually one thing about the game that I don't know if I want to criticize it or praise it for, is that like so much of the difficulty in the game can be bypassed using the features that you have. And, like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I guess if you really want a challenge, you can like challenge yourself to not use those abilities.
There's an achievement for that. Never buy upgrades and never use any relics.
Right.
So if that's the kind of thing you're into, it's possible. I feel as though it's basically an element of the game that you get these toys and then you get to play with them. And I actually kind of like that there is almost no part where Shovel Knight goes, nope, you're not allowed to use your phase locker here because that would be bullshit.
Yeah.
There's still bottomless pits where it doesn't help.
It's definitely a cue from like the Mega Man school of design. Like, I actually, George Weidman's review of it, he tallied like a whole bunch of NES games that it took inspiration from, and it's a pretty big list. Like, the obvious ones are Mega Man and DuckTales, Mega Man's basic structure of like choosing each of the bosses to fight, and then like getting the different abilities. It is entirely. It's a little more linear than Mega Man, because it's like you get 3 bosses to choose from at a time, basically. But then DuckTales, it takes like the basic form of attack from that, wherein you can hold down to like as you're falling to hit enemies with your shovel, which worked pretty well. And
took some getting used to.
They incorporated that into the platforming, which I thought was really neat. That's a thing I like, that when action platformers do, is that like they incorporate platforming into the fighting, and they incorporate your fighting abilities into the platforming, so it feels like one big thing instead of 2 like completely separate game states. So
the fact that you can get knocked into bottomless pits by like flying enemies so often it's not necessarily bad game design, but it is super frustrating.
Yeah, but I guess that is definitely a carryover from the NES days. Like, if you've played, like, Ninja Gaiden or games like that, generally speaking, the biggest threat is not running out of health, it's getting hit into a pit by an
Or
enemy.
into some sort of kill zone.
Yeah, fucking
By
spikes.
sure lava or water or...
And to its credit, the game actually, like, there are a bunch of different sets of armor you can get, and one of them actually stops you from flinching when you get hit. But in exchange, it makes you have heavier momentum.
oh yeah, I didn't get that one.
I actually, by the end of the game, I had unlocked everything, but I don't remember if I actually tried that one in a big level, because I always get paranoid about, like, what if it turns out bad? No, I should stick to what I know, even though that means I'll like, never get to try out any of the cool shit. But no, I actually, the game did get me to try out a bunch of things. I like how whenever you find a new ability, the like, next room is, like, built for you to use that ability to get through. And that's another cool...
The bunch of the unlockables are also always made so that you'll need that ability. I remember in, like, Propeller Knights level, I missed the Chester chest, and then one of the... What's the word? One of the music sheets was out of range in the air, and you obviously needed to be able to fly to get there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. But yeah. I think my biggest problem with the game comes from the fact that, so, like, most of the ideas from the game come from, like, old NES games, like... that they sort of mishmash all these ideas together, like Mega Man's character progression, DuckTales' core combat, like Castlevania-style item usage.
And
like
chickens
all these
in the wall.
Huh?
And wall chickens.
And wall chickens, yeah, that's right. All sorts of stuff like that, but one of the new ideas was the checkpoint system, which is basically, you get the checkpoints... And when you die, you don't have a number of lives, which thank God they abandoned that old shtick.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they didn't go for the live system. That would just have been bullshit.
Yeah.
That's one of the elements of the NES era that I am very glad not even Shovel Knight is trying to emulate.
Right. But they replaced it with a sort of Dark Souls-y thing where, like, when you die, you drop some of your money, and the money flies in, like, random directions and then sits there. And if you, like, you have to pick it up again to get your money back. And if you die again before you've picked up that money, then it just disappears. And it's gone. Like, that checkpoint system would work really well if this was a game where the bulk of the challenge came from combat. But in the late game, it doesn't. The bulk of the challenge comes from platforming obstacles. And pits and stuff like that. You almost, like, I totally can buy into using a checkpoint system where, like, the checkpoints are kind of sparse if it's based around not running out of health, because then it's sort of like an endurance run where it's like, okay, you can't put a checkpoint after every single combat encounter because, like, you know, that would make it way easier. If you can get past each combat encounter with at least one life, then you can get through. So, like, putting the checkpoints far away from each other makes sense. But when it's platforming challenges, then, like, I've already proven that I can get from this side of the room to that side of the room. Putting the checkpoint further away than that makes it kind of feel like bullshit, because I have to keep jumping through the same shit again and again.
Yeah.
So it feels like it isn't completely aware of what exactly about this game is challenging.
Well, or it's just a different focus, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, what I liked and also disliked about the checkpoints is the idea that you can actually break them for improved monetary value. Like, you can get bonus money if you smash a checkpoint, but then obviously the checkpoint doesn't work anymore. But that and the fact that there's only a handful of checkpoints in the game does mean, like both what you say, that you have to do some of the more bullshit elements over and over and over again. And that there's even a few checkpoints right before combat encounters, like mini-bosses. If you die after the mini-boss before the next checkpoint, you have to do that whole stuff over again. Like, I tried
you have
to
do the whole mini-boss fight, yeah.
I did... I think Blake Knight's level while trying to break all the checkpoints just for the achievement.
Yeah.
And that was brutal sometimes. And obviously that is supposed to be super difficult because I broke all the checkpoints. That was all me.
But it feels difficult in the wrong way. Because you're having to do every single platforming thing again and again and again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. That the checkpoints are so sparse that still, like, dying puts you back quite a long way, while not really punishing you, except for losing time. Is what I'm trying to get at. I'm rambling a little bit, but checkpoints are so far away that if you die just before the next checkpoint, and this can totally happen, you'll have to go through like 3 or 4 screens again. And the combat isn't that dangerous. Like what you said, the biggest danger is often falling into spikes or falling into death traps. And you have such a high health bar, especially once you get some health upgrades, which is really easy.
Yeah. That's my big problem.
It's just a slog.
The biggest challenge is the platforming, and like most of the stuff you buy in the game doesn't help you with platforming, it helps you with combat. Like, the bigger health bar helps you with combat. The bigger mana helps you with combat. I mean, the bigger mana bar means you can spam your invincibility more often, which that helps in platforming if you're dealing with spike traps and stuff, but not if you're dealing with pits.
Yeah.
There's no item in the game that will help you against pits. Except for the little glidey thing, like that the like dashy do. I don't remember what it's called, but
there's
that
two dashy doos. You have the gauntlets that you use to smash blocks, and the propeller blade that you can use to fly.
The propeller is what I'm thinking of, yeah. Like, that helps you a little bit if you need to move horizontally really quickly. If you need to move vertically really quickly, you got nothing.
Well, that's the kind of challenge they're going for, I guess. But it is really strange to see that you get a lot of health upgrades and power upgrades for combat, but then all the dangers...
It feels like two different focuses, because it feels like the actual level design is focused more on challenging platforming, but like the upgrade structure and the checkpoint structure, those are made more for combat.
Which is also, I guess, more of that DuckTales thing. It's definitely not very Metroidvania-esque, where you unlock new ways of getting places.
No, definitely
and that's not bad. I mean, it's just a focus. And the combat definitely isn't bad, especially in areas where it does integrate with the platforming. It can be really fun.
Oh yeah, no, I loved it. It's just like, it feels like it's not completely on the same page. Which, I might be over-exaggerating there, honestly. Like, it feels like a good cohesive whole. It's just challenge-wise, it does get frustrating in the late game, and it does feel like it's frustrating for the wrong reasons. Kind of like how in like Super Meat Boy... I loved Super Meat Boy, but in the last few worlds, it got frustrating because the levels got longer. And that kind of got rid of the... one thing I loved about it was that, like, each level was short enough that if I fucked up, I wouldn't have to redo a whole bunch of stuff. But in this case, I did. And it's like, I like that the levels are harder, but I don't like that I have to do them more when I die. And
that is entirely true, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Shovel Knight, where it's like, I'm enjoying the game itself, but I'm not enjoying having to replay all this stuff because I died at the end of it.
It's what I mentioned to you earlier, like in actual conversation. It's almost the horror game trope, where you want the players to feel challenged during the combat and during the platforming, and you want them to feel like they could very well fall and die and lose. But you don't actually want them to fall and die and lose and have to do everything over again, because that breaks the illusion of it.
I feel like that depends on, like, how the game is structured, because, like,
I'm talking about this game specifically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, like in Super Meat Boy, I brought that up. I died a million times in Super Meat Boy, and I never minded that.
Yeah, but Super Meat Boy is a skill challenge.
Yeah, in this game, it really does break the flow to a degree. Especially since, like, Super Meat Boy, I basically only enjoyed that game because of just the pure platforming challenge. But in Shovel Knight, a lot of why I enjoyed the game is because of, like, the look and feel of it.
I had the same thing.
Yeah, and, like, I mean, okay, fine. Nostalgia might have a hand in that. But like, honestly, a lot of the environments, like, everybody complained about, well, not everybody, but the people I heard from complained about the Propeller Knight stage because, like, the platforming is really frustrating in it. It, like, constantly throws you in different directions and stuff because you're on a blimp, and, like, it's
Airship.
windy and stuff. Yeah, whatever. You're on an airship. But, like, I love the feeling of being on an airship. Like, I remember at the very beginning of the level when you first get on and it takes off, and it's like, it just has that exciting feeling that...
I had the same thing, and then 3 screens in, I fell off, and I fell down to the starting screen. And I liked that was a possibility, but simultaneously, I can see why people would be frustrated. It did lend the whole level a more cohesive feel. Because it was like, I fell down while I was climbing up. Does that mean I immediately die? No, it just means you fall down. Like you would.
And you have to redo some of it. And it's like, if you're looking at it from a purely just game perspective, then it's frustrating to have to redo that stuff. But, like, it also makes it feel like you're on an airship. And that was
I guess it was part of the challenge for the Propeller Knight level, was to not get knocked off by those bullshit enemies and fans and everything.
Oh yeah, God, the fans. I remember that now. And yeah, like, that was frustrating, but it just felt wonderful to me. Like, the Propeller Knight stage, I don't know. I think I think I might have been like a flying squirrel in a past life or something. Because I just...
a squirrel.
Because I just love that feeling of being in the air and just like, I don't know. And, like, a lot of levels, they did a really good job of theming each of the levels to have a specific sort of feel and a specific sort of atmosphere that you're going through. The Plague Knight, it's a very, like, dark and like everything has a sort of poisonous feel. And then you have the Treasure Knight. Was that the one that felt like a BioShock level?
You mean the Treasure Knight was underwater? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was in the Iron Whale. Yeah, the look and feel of Shovel Knight is amazing.
Yeah, and it's like, that isn't even just nostalgia, because it doesn't just feel like it's trying to emulate those old games, it feels like it's transcending those old games.
Yeah, it was... You interrupted my train of thought for a second there.
Sorry.
I was going to say that every area has, like, its very unique aesthetic, and in visuals and in gameplay both. Where, you say, like, the Propeller Knight is obviously in an airship, and Treasure Knight is underwater, so you have that buoyancy. And Plague Knight and Spectre Knight play with, like, light and darkness. And
oh yeah, that's right.
King Knight is in a castle, and I like Tinker Knight the most, just because I like that sort of gear aesthetic with the
it was all steampunk,
the moving parts. It wasn't even necessarily steampunk. It was just loose moving parts and, like, what's the word? The conveyor belts. I like those, even though they were annoying occasionally.
Sure.
I just like the entire aesthetic of it,
and
of course the boss fight.
Yeah. You're just like, is this seriously going to be the boss fight? I'm just like smacking this nerd around as he runs around. Oh no, wait, no, it's a giant robot. Okay,
it's a giant knight. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, this is, like, Krellin and I actually had a conversation a few weeks ago on Twitter where we were talking about boss fights, and he was saying that, like, we as the games industry need to retire the idea of boss fights and how they need to be in every game, because in most games they end up shitty and not fitting the game at all. And I was like, I was going to say that's not true. This game has good boss fights, but then I couldn't think of anything. And he was like, get back to me when you can think of one game. And then, like, 5 minutes later, I came back and said, Shovel Knight. The one game I could think of that actually had, that I've played recently that actually has fun boss fights.
Well, semi-fun.
Sometimes.
I thought that some of the boss fights were really fun, and some of the boss fights were just kind of frustrating.
Yes.
Because when you get down to it, most of the boss fights are just smacking the other guy until he falls over. Yeah. And then some of them use the environment to decent effect, but it's...
Like, one thing I liked about it was that, and this might just be lowered standards for me, because I've gotten used to the prospect of every platformer having just completely shitty boss fights, because it doesn't... The basic idea of a boss fight doesn't really fit the genre.
That's fair.
And it's usually like a giant monster that shoots some big attacks at you that you dodge in the same way every time, and then like opens up a weak spot, and you hit the weak spot, and it goes "ow," and then it shoots
my
the
weak
things at
spot.
you again.
I don't know why I opened it just now. Maybe I should stop doing
it's like
that.
So many games have boss fights that work exactly like that. Like Donkey Kong Country, I replayed that game a few years ago. Like I loved Donkey Kong Country as a kid, but all the boss fights are that, and they've got to be like the low point of the game.
Well, it makes sense that they would be like that, because you have to stay within the game mechanics. If you have a platforming game and you put a boss fight in it, obviously you want the player to keep their platforming skills. Yeah. And the reason why they work as well in Shovel Knight as they do is because Shovel Knight has that action combat as a core set of it. That's why it worked in DuckTales as well.
But I think that, like, in pure platforming games, you shouldn't just have boss fights. You should have, like, climactic sequences that utilize the platforming and feel exciting, but don't necessarily involve attacking a boss a number of times. Like, the new Rayman games, Rayman Origins and Legends, they have levels that are, like, exciting, thrilling, like, chase sequences where you're running and you have to jump on stuff really quickly as it's falling or whatever and then get to a person. Those feel like boss fights as they should be in a platformer. And then it has levels that are actually boss fights, and those generally suck. Because they're constrained by our own perception of what a boss fight should be.
Yeah.
So it's like those
You're
games...
saying that the good boss fights play with the skill set and the mechanic set that the game has been providing you. And in the Rayman games, the combat tends to be less important. So if you then put a boss fight in that focuses on the combat, it's going to suck.
Yeah.
That's fair. And in Shovel Knight, most of the bosses fall within the combat paradigm and the combat parameters that you've been using throughout the game.
I liked that a lot
of them work.
A lot of the boss fights were generally not, like, regurgitating the same 2 or 3 attack patterns over and over and over. Because that's what makes boss fights boring for me. Is once you get to a point where, like, okay, I know what his attack pattern is. All I need to do is dodge his attack and hit him when he's weak, like, 5 times, and then I win. Because I think that's when it has completely lost its steam. And, like, a lot of the boss fights in this game, they were unpredictable enough that it felt like I was fighting a dude. And not, like, exploiting poor AI, like most games are.
I mean, that's fair. For me, some boss fights were like that. I remember Treasure Knight and Polar Knight, they were pretty okay. And obviously, Tinker Knight had the whole twist. But for other boss fights, like Plague Knight particularly, I just spammed the invulnerability and then ran up to him to smash him.
Oh, yeah, no. That's another thing I was going to say, is that we already touched on this, but a lot of the boss fights are let down by that one ability that lets you turn invincible for 5 seconds.
And then you have the chalices.
More like 3 seconds. But it's like... It's very brief, but it costs low enough mana that you can just kind of spam it. And that really lets the challenge down.
It allows you to avoid a large part of the challenge. And this is usually where people will say, well, if you don't like it, don't use it. But obviously you have been given this tool, and the game has been basically going on about how you can use your tools to solve the problems any way you see fit.
I'm just going to say it right up front. That is a really lame defense. Because it's up to the game to provide a balance. It's not up to me to decide which abilities are too overpowered, and which ones I shouldn't use because it makes it too easy, and which ones I should use. I think that's bullshit. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with, like, user provided challenges, like the gravity gun only playthrough in Half-Life 2 or stuff like that. But like. That's just for when you've already beaten the game and are trying to suck more entertainment value out of it. That is not for the first time you play through, how am I going to make this game adequately challenging?
Yeah, it should be a choice, not being put on you.
It should, yeah, and it should be upfront about which ones are like, because I'm making it sound like it should always be the same challenge for everybody, and like I'm okay with difficulty levels existing in games and stuff like that. But that's the key, is that the game says up front, this is easy mode, this is hard mode. Like, if the game said, here's an item that makes it easy mode, I guess that would be different.
Basically what it does, except this time
It
you
doesn't
need
tell
the
you
item.
that.
And it's one of the items that you need in order to get one of the optional challenges completed.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's a level that requires it. It's an optional level. It's just like a side level.
But at this point, we're getting off track again. The boss fights are basically functional. Some of them are fun and use the mechanics in good ways. Some of them are just wail on the enemies until they die. Like, especially, I liked the aesthetic of Spectre Knight a lot. But in practice, I ended up bouncing on his head a lot until he fell over.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, Tinker Knight and Polar Knight and Treasure Knight, they all play with their environments and with their mechanics in ways that are at least interesting.
That was exciting. And the final boss was really cool because the final boss made use of should I spoil it?
Well, we did the whole spoiler warning, but people who are listening, if you don't want spoilers for the ending of Shovel Knight, put your fingers in your ears right now. If you're wearing a headset, take the headset off first.
Yeah, basically what it is the whole game you're trying to rescue your like girlfriend, Shield Knight.
And at the end, who is a girl.
Yeah. And you you save her, but then you two fight the final boss together, and it actually makes it so that you need her and she needs you, and I thought that was really cool. She isn't just the damsel. I mean, she kind of is, but like she ends up being the hero as well in the end, because the way it works is she holds her shield up and you have to jump on her shield, and then like she launches you up, and then from there you can reach the boss and hit her.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really good, like, creative idea.
It was clever.
Yeah,
and the story implications of it were, I mean, I saw that coming. I'm assuming you did too.
Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, and then she saves you in the very ending cutscene, which I thought was cool because you saved her, she saved you. It's a symbiotic relationship.
Also, Black Knight is there for some reason.
Yeah, he was a bad guy, but then he was a good guy. I replayed the first level in New Game Plus, and like it's cool that you understand what he's saying more the second time, because it's like he doesn't want you to go like he's trying to stop you from going and like killing the Enchantress or whatever. And at the beginning you think it's because he's evil, but really it's because like he knows that she's actually Shield Knight. Like,
also,
he's been corrupted. Oh, do you know too?
Yeah, that's what I got from the last, from the last discussion.
Oh yeah,
find the Enchantress the first time.
I knew it was you all along, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it has some very minimalistic storytelling at the beginning, where it's like Shield Knight fell when an evil amulet unleashed an even more evil power, and Tower of Fate, and this and that. And then at the end, the Shovel Knight comes up to the Enchantress and says, "Hey, Shield Knight, what's up?" And she's like, "No, I'm the Enchantress now. You know that. And Shovel Knight's like, "Nah."
Oh yeah, sorry. It's been weeks since I played it, so I'm a little rusty on that. But yeah, that's right.
Also, did you save all the other knights?
I think so. Wait, how do you save the other knights? What?
If you have the boss rush before getting to the Enchantress, you have to beat all of them at once, and then they just kind of hang off there. Right. And they're like, "Help! You're not gonna go to the Enchantress without saving us."
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, I helped them all up. Yeah,
I'm kind of curious what happens if you don't.
Yeah, and I remember they were all like, "This doesn't change anything, but thanks."
Yeah, some of them were. Like Propeller Knight was, "Wow, your adventures are super cool. We should hang out more."
Oh yeah, dude, I liked Propeller Knight. He was a cool dude.
Yeah, I'd like that the bosses had enough character among them to be distinguishable.
Yeah, like, I just want to bro out with Propeller Knight on his airship. That seems like fun. And I also loved in the ending montage, they each, like, have things to do after the ending, and after the world has become good again. It's really charming.
With Tinker Knight making toys for children and then getting to play with them.
Just fun. The game did a great job of like having a lightness of tone and a good charm about it, and that extends to like the random people you talk to in town. Like they were pretty consistently funny, which is cool.
It has this very interesting approach to world building too, where you walk into town and there's a knight, and then suddenly a horse person walks past, and you're like, "Wow, horse person, what's up with you?" And then nobody talks about it, and nobody cares. And then
it's just a dog person,
and then there's a peacock person, and it's just this is the way this world works. There's just a whole bunch of weird people, and knights fight with shovels. And I think other games would either really try to highlight that, hey, this world has dog people and horse people, and there's a reason for that. Or they would just not do it and just only have people.
Right. And there would be like a BioWare-style expository dialogue. That's
you would
like,
get a party
there's
member.
These dog people here, what's up with that?
And then every boss would be one of the people, like one of the knights would be a horse knight.
Yeah.
Well, they might be, actually, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. You never see them under the helmet. That's true.
Yeah, helmet is the word I was looking for. I'm good at language today. But yeah, the world was really vibrant and colorful, and I liked visiting the towns and running through the worlds and dancing with an applefish.
Yeah, Troupple! The Troupple King was fun. And I loved the one lady with the hoop skirt when you, because, like, some people will be like, oh my god, the King Knight, he's taken my castle and whatever, and, like, you know, it's like, the Plague Knight has infected my crops, or something like that. And, like, when you kill each of these people, or not when you kill them, when you beat each of these bosses and you talk to the people, they might give you a reward or something. But there's one lady who is complaining about one of the bosses, and when you beat them and go back to her, she just does a dance. And it's like a really fun, like, charming, like sort of gypsy-esque dance. She, like, hops around on the tables and dances. She's like, yay, I'm so happy.
I also felt sorry for the king. It was like, you deposed King Knight. Cool, I can go back to my castle and find my pet griffins, Beak and Slashy. I wonder if they miss me. And I'm like, yeah, they probably don't. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that some ruffian may have shoveled them into another grave.
They were very
Wasn't
cute,
me.
though.
Could have been me. Wasn't me. Maybe it was me. I'm going to go somewhere else now. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with Shovel Knight. My personal biggest issue with it, and we've talked about this off camera before, is that there's the whole money system where you were encouraged to collect coins and gems, and you can get money by beating enemies and by digging up piles of coins and by finding hidden spots in the wall, and you can get more money by destroying the checkpoints and incurring additional risk. And then the money is used to buy some upgrades and some armors and some new shovels for a little while. But all the upgrades you can find are, like, you can find the upgrades in levels, and you find meal tickets for health, and you can upgrade your mana, but that all boosts to combat, which, as we've established, is not super difficult. It helps. All the health helps, especially against the boss fights, and having 100 mana definitely helps with the trick.
And to be fair, most of the abilities you have to buy, because remember, you don't just find the ability in the chest, you find the merchant in the chest, and he sells you the abilities. So it is true that you have to have money.
You generally have enough money to get it if you play through the level. But then, like, halfway in, you have so much money already, if you don't die all the time, or if you just get your money back whenever you die, that it just stops being a factor. At some point, I had maximum mana, and I bought all the meal tickets from the goat, so I knew that I would only get them from story purposes. And I had, I think, 8 of the 12 relics and enough money to buy all of them if they'd been $100,000 each, which they're not. And that just killed a lot of the motivation to do good in the levels. Like, I was still getting the shinies.
And to explore and to find the stuff, and I did it anyway, but it took away the satisfaction, I think, is the big thing. And I think it would have worked better if, A, it hadn't been for those meddling kids about the combat, or B, if, like, the abilities and stuff you unlocked helped with the platforming. see,
Also,
like, if the money was used as a scoring system,
I guess
like,
in a sense it is, but it's still
kind of,
very
but does it
interesting.
even record your scores for each of the levels? I don't even remember.
I don't think so. Maybe for the entire game.
Maybe. It's
But then you
honestly
could
hard
just
to... I'd have to go back and
levels.
look. Yeah, that's the other problem I have, is that if there was a total amount of money that you could get in the game, and you had to do basically perfectly in the levels in order to acquire that amount of money, that would work really well. But as it stands, like, if you play through every level once, you don't even have to replay any levels. If you play through every level once and get a decent amount of secrets and, like, don't lose that much money from from dying, then you will have unlocked everything in the game that you can get with money before you finish it. And I know that because I didn't find all the secrets, and I did lose money from dying pretty decently often toward the end game, in fact. And I still ended up having everything before I beat the game the first time. And so in New Game Plus mode, it's like, you can keep all the items you've unlocked, but the game is harder. And you can keep getting money, but what do I spend that money for now?
Why
Absolutely
would I
nothing.
bother, is the question. Because a lot of the platforming challenges are made additionally challenging because you can get more money. And then I walk into a secret area, and it's like, okay, now bounce on top of these fish to get all these diamonds, but don't fall into the eternal abyss. And I'm like, okay, I can also just not do that, and not risk falling into the eternal abyss.
Yeah,
and
but
as soon as
the only risk is losing money, which you don't need anymore, so it makes the whole
money
thing
and
just
time.
feel completely moot.
The only risks are losing money and time from having to
and
replay
time,
stuff.
that's true.
And that ties all the way back into what we were saying earlier about the checkpoints, that it's this very interesting system of risk versus reward and having to replay combat sections. Not even everything. Some bosses, some enemies stay dead, and some enemies just keep spawning. But it doesn't really work in a game where money is not that important.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you get more than enough of it, and it doesn't track towards anything. It doesn't help you, it only hinders you.
Yeah.
And it's not anywhere near the main draw of the game. The platforming and the combat and the story are draws of the game, but getting all the money definitely isn't.
And it feels like it's supposed to be.
So now I'm doing New Game Plus, or well, I started New Game Plus, and probably not going to do too much about it, but I played through a level in New Game Plus, and I saw all these extra challenges where I could get more money and then maybe die, and I just skipped them. And then I saw all the combats that you can get a lot of money for if you defeat them, like the mini-bosses, the dragon and the giant skeletons and all that. But you can also just tag on your invulnerability charm and just skip them. And that way I just started skipping things. And if you are playing an action platformer with very gorgeous levels and interesting enemies and good music, and you find yourself skipping things to get to the end quicker because it doesn't matter, there might be something not entirely well designed going on.
Yeah.
That said, it's gorgeous. The music is really good, and I was whistling some of it just today.
Yeah.
The platforming is pretty good. The combat works. Some enemies are interesting. Some of them are just slogs, especially because once you get the full health upgrades, and it is really easy to get full health upgrades, it's no longer a matter of whether or not you'll have enough health to get through the level, because there's enough food and enough checkpoints that combat is never going to be what puts you back for too far. It's almost always going to be platforming deaths.
Yeah.
But it's still serviceable. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's a bit of a slog.
Yeah, like, I do not regret kickstarting the game. I enjoyed myself a lot with it, even when I was dying over and over. And I'm not going to go back on that in the, like, after text for the blog post, like I did with Unrest. I enjoyed the game a lot. The flaws with it were absolutely not enough to make me not like it. It was fun going through each of the areas. It has a real charm. Like, if I could describe the game in one word, it would be charming.
That is entirely fair.
And I didn't grow up with an NES. I mean, I grew up with an SNES. That's totally different.
It's way different.
Yeah. So, clearly it's not nostalgia. I just thought the game felt great. Played great, generally speaking.
Well, for me, it was actually... I did grow up with an NES, and I did appreciate that it was that close to NES sensibilities, but like I said, it copies a lot of NES stuff, and some of it wasn't necessarily an improvement. So for me, it was more often that it was not because of the nostalgia that it worked, but almost in spite of some of the nostalgia elements, it was still just a really, really good game.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not good because it tries to be like an NES game. It takes the whole NES game thing as its like aesthetic, as its like style, and it uses that to its best. It like doesn't completely restrict itself. I think the big thing Yahtzee pointed out was parallax scrolling. Like, oh, NES games didn't have parallax scrolling. This is bullshit. But like, it does use more colors than the NES did. It does use a bit more sound than the NES could have, but it sticks to that vibe for the most part, and it's valid. It didn't have to be that way, but it did, and it really worked. I think a good way to put it was, I think Daniel Floyd from Extra Credits tweeted saying like, Shovel Knight, it's as if like one of the best Super Nintendo games just came out now. And that's what it feels like.
That is a fair description. And whether or not you'll like that is a personal thing, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not into side-scrolling action platformers, then obviously don't buy this. You'll end up being frustrated.
It is very much what it is. That is probably the end all of it. It is just a game that takes the NES aesthetic and is like, we want to be a game that is parts Mega Man and parts DuckTales and parts Castlevania in a graphical and oral style that is very reminiscent of the time we grew up in. And we're going to give it some decent writing and some interesting visuals, and that's it. Yeah. And if that sounds cool, then you should probably play some Shovel Knight. And if you're like, for whatever reason you don't like it, if you hate the NES era, or if you don't like action platformers,
yeah,
or if
I know
somehow...
a lot of our like readers are old like PC gamers. So like, I when I say old, I mean old PC games, not like you are old. but like,
oh, you totally are. Yes, you are.
Oh yeah, totally old
listener.
But like, yeah, like people, I know a lot of people that they grew up on stuff like Doom and XCOM and whatever, and they don't do platformers because they didn't grow up on them. So if you're one of those people, then you're not gonna enjoy Shovel Knight. Like, I'm sorry, you're not gonna enjoy it because it is what it is. But if you are one of those people, then you're probably gonna have a lot of fun. And I think we're beating the bush, beating the horse, beating around the bush is the expression. I think we're beating a dead horse.
I think your face is a dead horse.
Yeah,
but Shovel Knight definitely isn't.
Like one.
So that's it. We're done talking about it. Thank you for listening. Let us know what you thought of the podcast. If we ramble too much, or if we talk about interesting stuff or uninteresting stuff, or if we should talk about other stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, even though 2 of these options are not available on our website.
Yeah, and, well, I mean, I guess if we're gonna upload it on YouTube, so you can like, comment, and subscribe there.
You can, but it's less important. If you are going to like, comment, and subscribe, just comment on our website 3 times.
Yeah.
We'll love you extra if you do, so.
Because, like, we didn't get many comments on the last one, and I mean, we're not gonna try to guilt you into doing it, but until we have more feedback on what you guys want the show to be, we're just gonna keep doing this kind of stuff. Probably.
We're not going to guilt you into doing the show. We're going to hold the better show hostage.
Exactly.
Tell us what you want, or it's going to be more of this unfocused rambling forever.
Exactly. So,
all right, let's end it on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We're holding the better show hostage. Let us know what you want. Play Shovel Knight if it sounds fun.
Thank you and good night.
Bye, Internet.